Good morning. It's time for our Stearns County Board of Commissioners meeting. Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present and accounted for. Will you join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first item is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda this morning?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner.
I got a lot of volume here. I see we're going to closed session and then we're coming back with issues by commissioner. Could we just do the issues and then go to closed session?
I think we don't have to change the agenda for that, but when we get to that point, we certainly can do that, Commissioner.
That way, yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's what we often do, but I think it's set up that way in case we're coming back with something. But if you want to make that change now, that certainly is fine. Do you want to make a motion then with that change?
We'll just, with the approval, we'll just do that.
Okay. Are you making a motion?
That is a motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion or no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion's passed. Public access forum. Is there anyone here today that would like to speak before the board on an issue not in front of us? I do not see anybody from the public here today. Dr. Williams, is there anybody who's requested? Okay. Well, and then we want to continue to remind all residents that all of us are available, and also if you are interested in coming and talking about issues that are not found on a particular agenda, you can virtually call, or you can email, or you can be here in person. And just to remind you, you can speak once per month during the public forum. Consent agenda. Are there any items that any commissioners would like to see pulled? Or if not, a motion to approve the consent agenda is in order?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda, just with a comment afterward.
Okay.
I'll second, and Jeff, Planning Commission, everything went well?
Everything went well.
Okay. Commissioner Notch.
On that number 9, that Islands, was that property that one time was a request for a bar grill type? Was that property?
Yeah, that's the easement down on the Mississippi.
Okay.
Yeah, right, Ferry Point.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay. There is a motion and a second, and seeing no further discussion, all in favor of passing the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion's passed. And that's even with Ms. Berg taking her jacket off. Thank you, Angie. All right. Our next item is we are going to have, I believe, a presentation, an update from David Turch. Is that correct? Is that our next one? Yep. Welcome, Mr. Turch.
Well, thank you. It's always good to be home. Members of the board.
And before you get started, I do want to say for those listening that you're going to be able to tell us exactly how everything's going to play out in Washington in the next couple months, right?
And I'll be back in a couple of months to do that.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Things are changing so rapidly that it's just about a 5-minute by 5-minute change. So this is the best I can do quickly with a quick overview for you. First of all, we're almost out of time. It seems like this isn't Halloween yet, so there's plenty of time to do whatever we need. The House of Representatives has approximately 19 remaining working days in the year. They intend to adjourn on December the 10th. We'll see if that happens or not. The Senate has no such schedule, so we don't know where the Senate's going to go. As you've heard me say so many times before, the Congress has to approve all of the expenditures of the government to keep it running. It's a requirement of the Constitution. Of course, we haven't done that for years, and we're now operating under a continuing resolution that funds the government through December the 3rd. The House has passed all 12 of its appropriations bills. The Senate has passed none. 3 of the bills, however, have come out of Senate committee, and the good news, I think, for us here in Stearns County is that most of those bills are containing earmarks. Sorry, we don't call them earmarks anymore. They are congressionally directed expenditures, and for the other body, they are community funding initiatives. We don't even know what we're going to call them, but they're back. And we have been highly successful at using that, and we're going to continue to call it earmark process until they get their terminology together. We've been highly successful at getting those funds. It doesn't mean if you don't get an earmark that you're not getting the funds. Earmarks are simply the shortcut, so you don't have to do any additional applications, administrative procedures, anything else. The money's just yours to expend however it's apportioned within the appropriation. So those are the appropriation bills. You've heard of the Transportation Week for what, 5 or 6 years already? Folks, you know, this could really be Transportation Week. The successor to the FAST Act, or the governing legislation for transportation expenditures, expires Sunday. We need to do something between now and Sunday. That bill has been passed in a bipartisan fashion by the U.S. Senate. That bill is going to be taken up apparently without amendments or changes in the House, so it becomes law, and my guess is that can be approved by the U.S. House, already approved by the Senate, can be approved by the U.S. House sometime in the next few hours or at least the next few days. There's no particular reason that I can comprehend why we'd put that off. So the Transportation Week you've been hearing about for years may in fact be here. This is a $1 trillion bill. It's hard to even imagine what $1 trillion is like. But in that $1 trillion are $550 billion of new expenditures. This is like 4 times the size of any transportation bill with which I've dealt in the years that I've been in Washington. This is really a big deal. And we're going to take advantage of some of that money here in Stearns County. So hopefully the bill gets passed. Then we have the bill for soft infrastructure. We're not sure how that's going to be constructed, how it's going to be paid for. It changes about every 5 minutes. I can't give you a prognosis on that. The last thing really that's a big time item is the national debt. You've heard me talk about the debt so often, and people think of the debt the way I owe money and the way the county owes money. You have to pay it back. The federal debt isn't like that at all. The federal debt is something we owe to ourselves. So we've loaned ourselves money. A good example is every year the gas tax does not pay for the transportation expenditures that we've authorized to be expended. Where do we get the money? We borrow it from the Treasury, and a part of the national debt then becomes the U.S. Department of Transportation owing to the U.S. Treasury X billions of dollars or X hundreds of millions of dollars. It isn't the big number that should bother you so much because we owe this vast amount of money that's almost incomprehensible. What should bother you is the transfer payment to service the debt. And essentially, that's a kind of a transfer between Americans for the most part, but it goes to a great extent from people who are maybe less well off or middle class to those that are more well off, because those are the people who are buying not the T-bills that are not the savings certificate you're thinking about, but buying the T-bills and the bonds and the other things that aren't even available to the average American because you're buying them in the millions of dollars as opposed to a $25 thing. That's kind of where the debt is. The debt is extended to December the 3rd. Then Secretary Yellen can start playing the games again about moving the shells around. And that's essentially a cash flow game. How much are we taking in revenues to how much do we have to expend? So when they say we don't know when the government would default, well, we don't know what the receipts are going to be December 9th of this year as opposed to December 11th. We have a better idea of expenditures. Those are kind of the three big issues that are facing Washington at the moment. I know that Commissioner Persky was just there dealing with the park issue. I'll be anxious to hear how that is, how you've proceeded on that locally, but we will stay on that in Washington. The difficulty with the federal government is we don't react to anything very quickly. We're almost like the Catholic Church, where you're thinking about things in terms of millennials as opposed to next week or next year. We're not quite that far out, but the answer is the federal government just is incapable of reacting very quickly, but you know we've been working very hard on that project. We'll do the best we can. So I want to thank you much for listening to me, and then as you've heard me say before, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And hearing none, I want to thank you again for listening to me.
Oh, that's how we get us to be quiet, huh? Anybody have questions or comments? Commissioner Morgan.
I just wanted to comment on, David said $1 trillion is somewhat incomprehensible. To put it in terms of seconds, it takes more than 31,000 years for $1 trillion seconds. So, yeah, it's, I don't know how you can print that money that fast. But
That's actually older than am I.
little bit.
Well, thank you.
Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
Yeah, the worst case scenario, when discussing the national debt, I do point out, I think that the U.S. government filed bankruptcy twice, and once after the Revolutionary War, and I think after the Civil War. It has happened, but as long, you know, we're still here. And look at individuals throughout our society. Some of them very high profile. Bankruptcy is an opportunity, if you think of it this way, to restart a new beginning. It's not pleasant, it's not easy, but it's not the end either.
Could be the second time happened. Our national banking system failed in 1836.
1836?
It's when the National Bank failed. I don't know that we declared bankruptcy at that time. The difficulty today is that the entire global system is dependent on the dollar. And if the dollar ceases to be the medium of trade all across the world, then what happens to most of us who are in economics can't even comprehend the results of something like that.
So our local Rotary Club has an evening of erudition every year, Scotch or no Scotch, and this would be a good topic for that group, but they were not going to give us enough time to talk about it right now. Is there anything else you want to talk to us about that relates to any of the other projects, about where you see them at in this process, knowing they have to come to some agreements first?
I think it's just premature. We just don't know. We're in the middle of the process. The process, as you know, is described as messy, and that's a charitable way to describe it. We just don't know. We think we're close to the end, and then we'll see. I do want to thank you this morning. I almost forgot it. For the second year in a row, David Turch and Associates has been named by Bloomberg Government, as you probably have seen, as one of Washington's top performing lobbying firms. We're only able to achieve that thanks to you and to the staff here in the county, who are so wonderful to work with. You make us look good. Thanks.
Thanks, David, and we'll look forward to a few more updates when they come through. And let's face it, Congress has always been a bit messy. It just happens to have some additional challenges right now.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. All right, our next presentation and action item is from our County Attorney, Janelle Kendall. This is on approving the 2022 sex trafficking investigation grant application.
Yes, thank you. Here to talk about what we've done since we got the grant the first time, and this is basically the renewal grant. So again, Janelle Kendall, Stearns County Attorney. I'm here on behalf of the Human Trafficking Task Force. This has been quite an adventure, I think, since we first came down and talked to you about it. Commissioner Persky, you ended up in one of our first meetings kind of by accident, and we decided to keep you so that you could see what really goes on with this type of activity. And not only in Stearns County, this happens everywhere. But now that we have a task force and can actually focus on what's going on right here in this community, here's what that's looked like. We got our first grant, went operational in April of 2018, literally 3 days after Backpage went down. The main place that people went at that time to buy persons for sex was Backpage. And Congress eliminated it. And it would be like if all of the drug dealers that you were chasing all worked the same corner, it'd be really easy to go round them up when you knew where they were. Literally the day we got the funding, that corner disappeared, and we had to pivot to different places that persons are using for sex trafficking. This is what we have seen since between April of 2018 and this data goes through June of 2021. We've charged 44 felony traffickers now. Sex buyers are still, it's shooting fish in a barrel. Because of the amount of time that we put into those trafficking investigations to get the persons who are selling, there's only so much time left to do the buyer details, but we have done those. COVID obviously slowed us down a little bit. Those are still out there. But the victims that we have identified because of the resources that we have here in town, starting with Terebinth Refuge and including the Central Minnesota Sexual Assault Center, as you can see there, are substantial. And some of those victims, when we come across those, when we're shutting down a massage parlor and we find a couple victims in there, sometimes they'll cooperate with law enforcement and sometimes they won't. It's not an easy task to step up to the plate and say, here's what's gone on in my life. We have, however, had a number of trials where those persons have testified. And one of the other ways that we prove the felony trafficking charges is we put the buyers on the stand. So the guys that we caught buying when we rolled in have actually testified to prove the sex act for money during some of the jury trials that we have had. So there's basically the data of what's gone on the last 2.5 years. Here are the people at the table. And from the beginning, we applied for grant funding for 2 full-time investigators. And originally, one of those was in Waite Park and one was in St. Cloud. The Waite Park position, due to just staffing changes in Waite Park, now is at the sheriff's office. And what we're asking for today is to not only renew the funding for those first 2 investigators, but add a 3rd. But these are the people that are sitting around the table. We've done so much community training. In fact, when we first got that grant, that would have been a full-time job, just going from organization to organization, talking about what we had found. Stearns Electric was absolutely a phenomenal group to talk to. Those folks are out and around the county in all kinds of places every day. And for example, talking to them and explaining to them what they're looking for was really critical. We just talked to Metro Bus last week and would like to get to all of the deliveries in town, including our postal carriers, because we know that they see what goes on in the neighborhoods as they're out and about during the day. But yeah, 351 times we've been called just in the last 2.5 years, and 101 of those were enough to actually conduct a law enforcement investigation. We were able to charge 44 felonies so far. Again, another 80 buyers beyond the 100 and some that we've dealt with before we even got the grant. And when we do put the ads out posing as persons under 15, the demand triples. And that's not just here, that's everywhere. That's just how it goes. And we have been able to get 10 of those that were charged as felonies. So there again, there are trafficking victims. A number of those are juveniles. Because we have Terebinth Refuge here in town, we have a lot better chance of getting those folks at least some hope for getting out of the life. They have a place there that they can stay in the short run, and they've actually expanded 3 times so far because they found that persons who are just getting out of the life needed to be in a different space than those who are already down the path of being out, being through treatment, starting to get a job. The people who are really doing well did not necessarily do great when you put them right next to the persons who just came in last night. So they've actually had phenomenal community support, and that is all privately funded at Terebinth. We have, through the county, started to actively look for our juvenile victims. We know that kids who run away 3 or more times in a year are probably at high risk. So shortly after we started this in 2018, we put together a group of people to screen every single one of those, and we did find these numbers that some of them were actually already being trafficked and others were actually actively being recruited at that time. This was one of the things, this took us 2 years, but when we finally got into dealing with these cases and this many felonies and this many buyers and really digging into what we could do in the criminal justice system, our laws were very archaic. There was a case that actually came out of Candy, Ojai County, where the question was whether or not buying a person by text was buying in a public or private place. Because the law used to say if it was in a private place, it's a misdemeanor, but a public place, a gross misdemeanor, hearkening back to the stereotype of Hennepin Avenue and persons walking the street. Now you do this all on your phone, on text. And the Court of Appeals found that that was a private place, so we had to go get the law changed, that it wouldn't matter where you bought this person, really shouldn't be the criteria that we're looking at. But here are the changes in the laws that did go into effect in September. And we did have local help on both sides of the aisle getting these things through. These are now listed as a crime of violence, which means we can get a higher sentence on these traffickers. We have had a number of them that we got a statutory maximum sentence because these tend to be career criminals who are selling drugs and persons at the same time. So not surprisingly, we were bumping up literally against the statutory maximums on some of these sentences. We changed, as we said, for the sex buyers, whether they're doing that on their phone, on their computer, on the street, it doesn't matter. Those are all gross misdemeanors now. And we have caught a number of people repeatedly. And considering how many people swarm to those ads every time we put one up, we're not catching people that this was the first time and this is some accident. This is a very, very heavy trade in this community and in others. And then the trespass at the shelter, because we have Terebinth Refuge, we found that a fair amount of those traffickers, as soon as she gets out of the life, even for so much as one night, they're back there looking for her. So that was only a misdemeanor to trespass at the shelter. So we made that the same that it would be at Anna Marie's. So those are all gross misdemeanors now. So the law changes really went all the way across the board from what we're doing with the traffickers that we're now able to find and prosecute, with what we do with the buyers, and with what we do with victim protection. And that's why we're looking for more resources from the state. The massage parlors actually all of a sudden started springing up around town right after we started this. That was in about 2018, early 2019. All of a sudden we had 15 massage parlors in town. What the heck? Once you drill down a little bit on those, obviously there are massage parlors that are legitimate businesses, and there are others that were literally fronts for this. And the first one that we walked into, we found 2 victims that we really candidly weren't even prepared to deal with at that time, and found a couple of the people that were trafficking there. So we did have some persons charged and some victims recovered. The city of St. Cloud has told us that we've barely touched the tip of what's going on in those places. So there are a lot more victims that we could be recovering in those places. It's just really time consuming. Here's just a cross section of those 44 felons that we have so far and the sentences that they received. Again, it's a cross section of who we come across, what we can manage to prove, mostly through cell phone data and search warrants, and identifying these people through their victims. But that just gives you a cross section of what some of those look like. And now this infamous picture that was in the St. Cloud Times before we got the grant funding of the 100 or so buyers that we had found so far. And as I say, that's all we got to do is put up an ad, and that will happen. It's been a matter now of having to prioritize. With 2 full-time investigators, we've put our priorities into those felons, into the traffickers. We do the buyer details when we get a chance. We'd like to be able to do more of those. But in order to do more than we're doing, we would actually need a 3rd investigator. And candidly, I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to get that, because right now it's kind of tough to do grant writing. Your data coming out of COVID might not be what it used to be. And we've been right there keeping track of it all along. So I'm cautiously optimistic that not only will the funding for the 2 investigators be continued, but I think we have a good shot at getting a 3rd. And that one would make it permanent, one in Way Park, one in St. Cloud, and one in the sheriff's office. And the sheriff is here. The sheriff and his chief deputy have been very involved in this from the beginning. It really helps that they both worked in a drug task force along the path of their careers, and they can really give us some good insight as to what's going on with these things, because these are the drug dealers and the dealers in persons are basically one and the same. We have a lot of community training requests that we can't even get to right now. Again, you have to prioritize your time, and we have put that for the most part into the felonies. But we are looking forward to be able to, we can report back to you kind of as often as you'd like, candidly. This is money that comes from the state. And there are a whole bunch of hoops that you have to jump through to get to it. And I think they're all good and fine loops, candidly. And this board has been very supportive of our work in trafficking. We do have the data analyst that works on this trafficking team as part of Stearns County's full-time work in my office. And that's been a critical part of it. We can't do it without you guys. We appreciate your support, and we're just looking for approval to go ahead and submit this grant and see how it goes.
Well, thank you and the team for this work. And if there's a group of broader community partners that can work together, go after these folks, help the victims, all bringing back some really good outcomes, it's really appreciated. I was thinking about the data tracking, and I'm sure the community partners are helpful with that as well. Are there questions for Attorney Kendall? Lee?
Not necessarily a question.
Or comments.
But I don't know how to make this happen, but somehow we need the community to be aware that their eyes and ears are valuable assets if they see something happening in their immediate vicinity that doesn't make any sense, and call it in. I have worked the call center for 9/11 a couple of shifts over the years, and yeah, some people abuse the system calling in a lost dog, but there are we do have a way of dealing with that type of information, and can transmit that information pretty fast if you know about it. I have no idea how to make the public more aware that, yeah, there's a problem and they could be part of the solution, but it is so. So you see something weird, let us know.
Thanks, Commissioner Lensmeyer. Anybody else? Commissioner Persky?
Yeah, Janelle, yes, thanks for coming in. I've been in with the Human Trafficking Task Force from almost the beginning, and it certainly was a grim and sobering but yet disheartening experience for me. And I think going back to my teaching by coaching and these girls getting into that and working with the task force, it allows us to at least give them a chance to get out and encourage those folks not to get into that. So the monthly meetings we have, usually anywhere from 15 is almost to 30 people. And they're a very eclectic group from law enforcement and the attorneys, Sheriff's Department, Place of Hope sometimes, or Salvation Army, yeah, and the social workers, schools. And so it not only gives us a chance to talk about the human trafficking, but some of the other needs we have in the community as well, and share information. So it's a very good networking operation. So I just hope we can continue it. The grant is very helpful. And so, yeah, let's continue to keep up the good work.
So looking for a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve it.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Persky. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. Thank you, and the task force. Really appreciate it.
One other update that I have for you, seeing David Church here, we did just receive a federal grant for the Supervised Visitation Center, which will actually end up being right here in this building. So to let you know, when he's talking about the money coming out of Washington and that we're paying attention, one of your priorities going forward has already been granted.
Right, which is great. I was hoping you were going to bring that up. That's good celebration for those kids and those families.
This is off topic here, but I just want to thank you and Sheriff Syka for your letter of support to try and bring a state amateur baseball tournament to central Minnesota. So thank you.
We're baseball people.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, administration. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We have 3 items under administration today. They're beginning on package page 208. And the first one is another request to use some of the ARP dollars for the co-responder model in the sheriff's office. I did put into the information there a reminder of where we've spent the dollars so far, and you can see there's about $8.5 million spent so far of the ARP dollars, the bulk of which was using the revenue loss component of the ARP and allocating that for road construction. We intended to bring a little bit of a discussion about housing to you prior to this, but Mr. Fortier was in an unfortunate accident and hasn't been available to come and visit with the board and make some recommendations. So that will still come sometime in the future. And then, as you know, we, as I've reported to you, I think last meeting, we're working to do a request for negotiations to get that out to internet service providers, which you've at least in the past said that you would spend up to half of the ARP dollars for that. But this is one specific action, and I think if you have questions or maybe even the sheriff wants to make a little bit of a presentation, I would just have you interact directly with the sheriff. This is to fund a police officer that would be paired with the mental health expert or mental health social worker and to purchase a vehicle and equipment for that officer.
Sheriff, would you like to come and talk to us a little bit about this? It'll help for the public to understand too. Appreciate your being here.
Good morning. As Mike indicated, the Sheriff's Office is requesting some American Rescue Plan funding, which specifically has language for mental illness and addressing mental illness for the purpose of establishing a co-responder model within the Sheriff's Office. Maybe you're familiar with the co-responder model, maybe you're not. Basically what it takes is a mental health professional teamed up with a law enforcement officer who will be specifically and specially trained in some mental health response to respond to mental illness calls. And just for a couple examples, our stats in 2018, we responded to 62 behavioral health calls, we call them. And in 2020, we responded to 212, so almost 4 times as many in a couple years. You can look at that in a bunch of different ways. Maybe it's COVID related, maybe it's just the changing of the world or what have you, but our behavioral health calls have obviously dramatically increased. I think if you talk to any law enforcement agency, you would find that people are calling us a lot more for family members in distress, suicidal attempts, children out of control. Those type of calls are what classify kind of behavioral health calls. So this is a unique opportunity and an exciting opportunity for us as a law enforcement agency to team up with, I guess, the private side of the world and respond to these things on the front end. St. Cloud Police Department has had a co-responder model for several years now, and if you need to, we can certainly get you in touch with them, but I would deem that to be a pretty big success over at their agency. What it allows us to do is honestly get on the front end of these things instead of having officers tied up, patrol officers tied up at calls for a long time. This specialized unit, if you would, could respond if they're on duty. Obviously, it's just one deputy that we're asking for and one mental health worker, which you guys have already approved a couple months ago. But there's a lot of follow-up to that, and there's a lot of making connections with resources and doctors in the hospital and that type of thing that I think would benefit the county in general, the entire population of Stearns County through this. Basically, there are co-responder models all over the country. Everyone is an individual, I guess. Ours will look a little bit different than St. Cloud Police Department's. I can assure you that because of it being in Stearns County and being with the Sheriff's Office, that we will be frequently communicating with St. Cloud's. There's also one planned at this point, although I don't know where that's at exactly, for a dedicated person for St. Joe, Sartell, and Waite Park, those 3 cities, to be teamed up with an officer from one of those 3 agencies, but I'm not sure where their program is at this point. But, you know, this will be kind of a team concept in some ways. They'll be communicating, and we'll obviously, as an agency, will reevaluate the program as we go along to make sure we're fitting everyone's needs. I have spoke with all of the cities in Stearns County, minus those ones that I just mentioned in the city of St. Cloud, about assisting them with their health calls also, whether it's referrals after the fact, because I think the reality is even if you live in Sauk Center, Belgrade, or Melrose, you're a Stearns County resident and you're probably going to be using some type of Stearns County resources in the long run for mental health. So I guess I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
Questions, comments? Commissioner Persky?
Sheriff, the request is for a squad as well for the position. Is that going to be a fully equipped regular squad that we'll be purchasing?
Yes and no. To my, I guess I envision, and I think there's maybe some statistics that back that up. There'll probably be more of an unmarked car, and this will probably be more of a non-uniform type position, more of a logo wear and khaki pants, just because sometimes uniforms set people off. And it also, in my mind, if we're responding to a residence, let's say, and the neighbors are all out looking, they might see the squad car and, you know, wonder what's going on. So the more we can kind of be non-intrusive, I think, with that, but it'll still need to be a squad car that's equipped with some lights and sirens and that type of thing.
Okay, communication, yeah.
Communication, yeah, computer.
Other questions?
Well, I guess I would move the requested action.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And my comment before we vote was just going to be, I really appreciate both you and Chief Deputy Miller taking time to talk with me about the importance of, you know, lines are drawn by people. People don't always go by lines, and we have a lot of needs in this area, and the work that the CAT team and all of the different jurisdictions are doing are really important, and our human beings are moving around. And as you pointed out, somebody could be in Belgrade, but then coming on the east side of the county, and the importance of continue to try to figure out how to break through the silos while respecting the different jurisdictions. Yeah. So I appreciate that. All right, a motion has been made and seconded. Did you have something else?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment. I think it was last week at our Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. Yep. You know this issue is probably not going away when the representative from the school district said they're hiring counselors as far down as about kindergarten. You know, just part of it probably from COVID type situations, but you know, obviously I'm thinking this need's going to probably increase before it decreases.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've had a couple of conversations with different superintendents who have talked about not only the mental health needs of kids and staff and teachers, but actually parents. The amount of just emotions coming out sideways over the last year and a half, and a number of those things. We have a lot of seniors that are isolated, a lot of people trying to deal with a lot of different challenges. So yes, it was interesting that it was the school district person that said that. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Nodge. Anybody else? Are you ready to vote? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion passed.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
I have a question for Sheriff. I was just wondering, did you get a chance to watch St. Cloud Police Chief Blair Anderson testify before the Senate hearing on policing?
I did not.
That's probably the first Senate hearing I've ever watched in its entirety. It was quite interesting, and he was quite impressive.
Yeah, no, I obviously have, because of our close proximity, have had an opportunity to speak with him for those same topics, so I knew what he was going to go talk about, and he delivers a good message.
Yeah, anybody that has a chance to watch that, I would recommend it.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. He is definitely impressive and has a lot of experience with dealing with this. All right, our next item, Dr. Williams?
Yes, next item, thank you, Madam Chair, is the resolution regarding appointments to boards and committees. And just as a reminder, we started this discussion at our strategic planning retreat more than a year ago or a year and a half ago. And then in July, we had a lengthy discussion about how we might make some changes in our processes or our policies to encourage some increased diversity on our boards and committees. I brought to you a resolution, I think it was our last meeting, and got additional feedback from board members, and that resulted in the resolution that's, I would say, is a bit pared back from the one that was presented to you 2 weeks ago. I guess, and I missed that in the meantime, between some of those board discussions, we also asked for feedback from board members of the various boards and committees. And so the resolution before you is a little different than the one that you saw last time, and I've described that in the cover memo. Do have one suggested change that came after we completed this, and in the bullet number 4 there, I would suggest, and Shelley Benson reminded me of this morning or yesterday, that we could just have that stop at the end of Wetlands Rules Committee. So just there will be no county commissioner on that committee. We don't see the need to expand that at this time.
And you wouldn't need a change to do that, would you? Would you need us to approve a change?
Yeah,
to
just
expand?
delete that part of
I was
that.
just thinking about that. We've got a couple others that if they're able to get ones. The small reminder on number 3 is it's actually the Aquatic Invasive Species Awards Panel.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's a one meeting thing. It's not actually being on their group.
And then Commissioner Mergen presented an idea to me yesterday, and I don't know, Commissioner Mergen, if you want to elaborate on what your suggestion was, but if the board wants to, I think we can alter that bullet number 6 to accommodate that.
Yes. Several of these committees are appointed by commissioner district. They're not overall. So my point was not every commissioner district is the same. So I wanted something in there that would say, instead of the population of the county to represent the population of the county, change that to the population of the commissioner district in those instances when it is appointed by that commissioner.
So just so I'm understanding, that would mean there are oftentimes other seats on that committee, so it wouldn't be impacted. And then in all cases, I'm saying this with a smile, but it's a question, since women are in all parts of the county, half would be, right? Okay, okay. And it does get to be a little tricky, right? It's going to be a process over time. We're striving to get there. If somebody is in the middle of a...
And Dr. Williams is the wordsmith, so he could
help us with that.
And I think I would just say something at the end of that when appointments are made by district, the makeup of the population of the district will also be considered.
Right.
Or something
And if it's
to
over the general count,
that impact.
the whole county, then this would apply.
So the goal is that we're going to be attempting, and we do have diverse populations, obviously, and younger adults through the whole, but I totally get your point. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to, more as a county, get some, when we're talking about appointments that can be impactful by who is or isn't living in any particular area. Okay, Commissioner Persky.
Yeah, Mike, could we just add or commissioner district on that?
Yeah, perhaps. I was messing with that and could too.
Because it would be, that would apply to the ones that are county-wise. But I did have another question.
Wait, just real quick before you get to there, just so we could put this one. We have other people serving on many of these committees that are not direct appointments from commissioners. And in that case, those could also help us depending if they're meeting the interest and needs for that. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify. Okay, Commissioner Persky.
Yes. Number 5 about moving the commissioner off the voting member on the park commission. Just wondering about if we have any other commissions where we are voting members as commissioners that need to come off that way.
I don't believe so. In fact, we're
what
taking.
about
I think that's.
I was going to ask about extensions. You guys don't
No.
vote on extensions.
Yes, we do.
We do vote on
Oh, an
extension.
extension.
Commissioner Persky and members, but that's established by state law, so we don't control that. That's why that one is there. And we're taking care of that issue by removing a commissioner, for example, from the Tax Abatement Committee, at that, that commissioner on that committee would vote, but now that we're taking care of. So I don't think there are any others that we would have there, where we have a commissioner voting on an issue before it comes to the county board.
So would it be fair to say then on the extension one, that it's really an extension committee, we happen to be the ones that are placing people on it, right? It's kind of a little different in that way, like the DAC, the Dairy Advisory. In many ways, it's that group who's reaching out and trying to find people, the right mix to be on there. We just end up saying, that's also kind of an extension committee.
And then one other thing, Dr. Williams, number 2, the special criterion for the appointees and just, can you give us examples of that? What are you looking at for in that?
I believe particularly on a couple of the human services committees, there's established criteria that we need someone from.
Yeah, schools would be an example.
I think there's something with daycare.
Yeah, yes. And I'm not sure that this will result in any changes.
But I thought we had done that before, so.
Well, and we're not directly, we might be recruiting for those, but those aren't done by district then necessarily. They're additional people to have a mix. If you even think about like with our CJCC, that's a mix of people that have specific positions or relations, or frankly, while we're not making appointments to the trafficking task force, that there are particular positions there. So we do have a few where that's relevant. And actually, one of your District 2 appointments to corrections could have filled that education piece, but it's kind of nice because we now have an assistant superintendent who's on there. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay. Other questions? Or if we're ready, believing that Mike is going to help us wordsmith that appropriately, and I think he's getting what we're looking for. Is there a motion with that modification to approve this, to accept this resolution, to approve this resolution?
I'll make that motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Notch. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Mergen. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right. Thank you. Motion's approved. All right. Third item.
Third item, Madam Chair and members, is to have a discussion about the 2022 preliminary budget and tax levy. As you know, you approved the preliminary levy with an increase of 4.25% in the property tax levy. That, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's $3.2 million, I think would be the dollar amount, something like that. And at the time of that approval, we were requested to go back and take another look at the levy so we could continue a discussion before we bring back the final levy for adoption at the end of November. And so the Budget Committee has combed through the budget in an attempt to, or not an attempt, we did identify some potential changes to the budget that can be considered. And so I think Steve and Sarah are going to walk us through this information, and then we'll have the discussion.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Steve Hamas, the Assistant Administrator. And Sarah Butch, our Finance Director, is here with me, and we're going to tag team going through the update on the budget discussion. Again, Budget Committee does go through and try to find ways to, possibly reduce the budget on an annual basis, but as the questions were more specific this year, we wanted to let you know where our thoughts came from. So I want to start out with the process so far and where we've been. Again, the budget process for the county starts in April. And so, again, we go through the process of working with departments to get all of their requests. When we came with all the requests, we were looking at a budget levy increase of 12.5, just under 12.5%, which we knew was probably not going to be acceptable to the board for next year. And so the Budget Committee goes through and tries to work with departments to reduce that amount. And again, we went from 12.5 down to 4.25% increase through that process. As part of those cuts, you can see outlined here that we reduced the personnel that was requested from 14 down to 4. We reduced the amount of money that we've set aside for transports and border prisoners, which again is a number that fluctuates over time, as those members from CJCC are aware that, our population is a little more of the population that we're afraid of lately as opposed to the ones we're mad at, and so we have a lot more folks in the facility than we prefer. We've reduced the amount of money we've had in human services for commitments down to a record low. Melissa has done a great job of managing the human services budget over the course of her tenure here, and that's reflected in reductions in some of her lines, but we are really being aggressive in taking a look at what we think we can do in this line item. We've moved one highway project from being funded by the levy to being funded by the sales tax, and we've shifted a lot of capital equipment items from being funded by the levy to being funded by fund balance, because again, they're one-time expenditures. And again, we like to use fund balance for one-time expenditures so there's not impacts in future years on the levy.
So as part of our analysis, we did pull some data on some of our neighboring jurisdictions, whether it be the counties or the cities nearby, that are experiencing similar or growth to what we are here in Stearns County. So we can look at the levies, of course, in all kinds of different lights. This is just the one angle of looking at the percentage increase from one year to the next. So as you can see, I pulled some of our neighboring jurisdictions to show that with expanded tax capacities similar to others, we have the lowest average levy increase from year to year compared to some of those others. I'm going to point out real quick, if you look at Wright County, you'll notice in 2019 they had a very significant levy increase, and I'm sure you're aware that they did some large facility upgrades that required them to take out debt. And that will be one of the things we talk about in a short time here in this presentation, is to have us not look like that if we can plan ahead. And so I wanted to point that out as we go. Another point I have off to the left there is that when we came to the board in 2021, about a year ago in September, we had the levy at a 2.75% increase. And we did our work to get it down to a 1.22% increase at the time. So if we would have left that where we were, our request today would be a 2.7% increase. So again, when you look at things in a vacuum, you're only looking at a certain thing. I kind of have to expand your vision there to see that the decisions we make today will impact our future levy increases. So where we are at today, it's kind of already been said by Dr. Williams, but our proposed levy increase coming into today is 4.25%. To get to about a 3% levy increase, the Budget Committee would need to be able to identify approximately $1,050,000 in savings. That would impact the levy, not just expenses, because of course, some expenses when you cut, there's a revenue that goes away as well. So looking at the levy, Steve and I are going to go over 4 different options that we would like to present to you today, and then we can have a discussion.
So the first option is to look at the road projects. Again, as we go through this process, typically every year, the budget's been fairly well cut before we bring it to you. And there's not a lot of nickels and dimes or loose change lying around in the budget. So we're really left with looking for large targets and large pieces in order to make the budget numbers work. So again, these options are those large items that we can identify to get there. The first one is, again, to reduce or shift another road project off of the levy. There is one project on the levy on the project list for next year that's $1.1 million. So that would certainly hit the target. But of course, the need still doesn't go away. You have to do that in the future. And of course, as we all know, construction costs don't go down, they go up. So if you defer it, those costs are going to be higher in the future. Commissioner Persky, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, Commissioner Persky.
He saw me roll my eyes. So
it actually, Could we let him just go through the different ones and then go back?
But
to
this
them?
relates to the transportation because we experienced that in Sartell and we delayed
Okay.
projects like that. And once you stack, then of course those construction projects, they're still there. And then you have a large amount in 1 year and you suffer that, or your roads are in terrible shape. And again, that's difficult by just always delaying those construction projects.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Amos.
The second one is we can reduce our technology funding. We spend about $2 million a year on regular, ordinary technology projects. Our spending over the past 6 years, as you can see on the chart here, is just about $1.7 million. We used to be at $2 million, and back in one of the budget crunch times, back in 2010, 2012, we cut that back to $1 million. And it took us 5 years to get those numbers back up to where they needed to be. We added about $200,000 a year to try to get those numbers back up. It's an easy place to go to cut, but it's also a detrimental place to go to cut. As you heard at the strategic retreat we had last week, the county really depends on technology to provide all of our services. That's more important now more than ever, based on providing services in a post-COVID world where people want services virtually. They want them in the field, where we need to empower our employees to have technology, as well as having technology in our buildings. So again, we certainly can cut technology, but again, you're going to have to add those costs back in future years, and technology costs have historically grown faster than inflation. I would say they are typically grow about 10 to 15% a year, as opposed to regular inflation of 4 to 5%. The third option is to reduce our capital equipment spending. We're spending, again, on plow trucks, squad cars, pickup trucks for highway. Looking at, again, trying to cut $1 million out of our capital equipment. Again, the highway budget is at just over $1 million in capital equipment. And you see the list of what the highway department is asking for. So that'd be 2 pickup trucks, some survey equipment, an excavator, a forklift, 2 plow trucks, and we typically buy 2 plow trucks every year because we keep them for 13 years. So it's a nice rotating cycle to keep our budget and levy consistent and level, as well as a couple of trailers. And in order to make the numbers fit, I had to throw a squad car in there too. But again, these are expenses that don't go away as well. And I mentioned the plow trucks, but again, with the rest of our fleet of vehicles, we're monitoring that to make sure that we don't have any bumps in that. Question?
I was just reminding you to eat the microphone.
Eat the microphone. Okay. So again, as you see, we're looking at $1.4 million in capital spending for 2022 is what's currently projected. In order to reduce that by the $1 million, we'd only be left with $400,000 in capital equipment. That would essentially be housed in the sheriff's office. They have $300,000 left of capital equipment, and then some in facilities and parks. It's for very minor items. We have already shifted, as you see on the slide, $200,000 of capital equipment to using fund balance for next year to try to keep the levy low already. So those are the 3 options I wanted to cover, and I'll turn it over to Sarah for the last one.
All right, option 4 relates to debt service. We've had a few discussions on this at the board level, but our current debt service levy includes an increase to fund balance, meaning we're saving some money by increasing the levy a little bit this year as we future look into what our debt service plan may look like into the future. Our debt service payments have averaged about $3.6 million per year in the past 7 years. And this year, we have debt payments only of 1.4 because we've had some bonds mature over the past year. When we look at our future law enforcement center, the debt is anticipated to be over $12.5 million per year. So that's over triple our annual payments. And that's a fairly conservative estimate, as you will learn as we go down that discussion path. So, of course, our impact here, similar to what we've talked about as others, is debt service is not going to go away. Depending on the decisions made with the law enforcement center, that debt will be necessary evil. And so we will need to pay for that, whether it's saving now or whether it's in the future. So this slide is extremely small print, and I don't believe you have it in front of you any larger, but this is, I'll spend a little bit of time here. So I have two sides for you to analyze. On the left side is what it looks like today in the levy that you have been presented and what our plan is as a budget committee looking forward. The right side is if we take away 1.5 million from our 2022 levy, what that will do to our future. The highlight, of course, is in 2025, and that's just our estimated timeline. When we go to make our first bond payment on our new facility, the levy increase is going to need to be about 9 points. The total levy increase is going to be about 9.4% if we keep it the same, which is all shocking already if you looked at our history. The residents haven't seen that in quite some time. If we take out that 1.5 million now, you'll see that that comes to about 12% or 11.9% as a total levy increase. The difference in those two of a couple percent may not look real alarming, but of course, you don't know what else is going to come up. You have elections fluctuating years, you have capital requests, you have grants that come and go, and other funding sources. So our goal by doing what we proposed on the original debt levy is to maintain that amount down. Now, one assumption I do have within here that I will note is, of course, we know our levy every year as a whole is going to grow some. So I took a 3.5% assumption that we're going to increase our regular levy 3.5% every year so that we could not compare it to today's dollar amount. So I took that based on our historic levy growth. Randy, did you have anything to add on that?
I think one of the things, we just got our ratings back for the HRA bond, and we maintain the AA+. And one of the things they mentioned that we're not doing is like a debt service plan. And the trouble with doing a debt service plan is once you do the plan, you have to follow it. If you don't follow it, that's worse than doing a plan at all. So, you know, it's one of those things that's easy to talk about a plan 5-10 years down the road, but to actually follow through is difficult. And I think we're seeing that today is, you know, you have 4 options to look at. And I think, you know, really the only solid option is to do something with debt service. But I think Sarah did a good job of telling you the consequences of that. So.
To wrap up, you know, again, these are the 4 best options for if you want to make the budget or the levy go lower that the budget committee has. Again, this is the kind of thing that we look at on an annual basis. So again, if we do nothing, you know, we're at 4.25 for this year. And if we go forward, looking for 2023 and forward, depending on labor talks, again, we're in a negotiation year and inflation and all the other things that are going on, we're looking at levies going forward of probably in the neighborhood of 4.5. If we do reduce the levy now, at some point we're going to have to add back the cuts that we're making, be it technology, capital equipment, or roads. Those costs will go up due to inflation. If it's debt service, it's going to shift our debt payments, and you saw the impact that Sarah provided. And so our levy for 2023 and beyond are looking more like 6% or more. So sorry that it's not more pleasant news, but that's where we're at. So again, yeah, we also, just to make sure that you're aware that we do look at everything. You know, we looked at those. These are the best of the alternatives. We also did take a look at personnel. Again, we do that every year. Our contracts talk about eliminating vacant positions first if we're going to go down that road. And our vacant positions are primarily in the sheriff's office, in the jail, or in human services in child protection. And those are 2 areas that it really is like cutting off your nose to spite your face, because that doesn't really work for us at this time. So the next steps, again, we still have a couple of months to continue to think about this, for the board to ask any other questions, for us to review things with departments if things change. Again, we are, as a budget committee, looking at impacts and forecasts and things as throughout all of this time. We'll continue to gather more information and provide that to you during this time. And again, the T&T meeting will be the evening of November 30th for a public presentation, and then the board will have to adopt the levy and budget in December.
So today, you're not looking for any action, but you're looking for some questions, reactions, thoughts? Is that, I mean, if they've,
Madam Chair, we're not necessarily looking for action, but we wanted to create the discussion. And thanks, Steve and Sarah, for that. And I tend to agree with Randy that you know, the most realistic option is to do something with that debt service. And you can make an argument that we shouldn't be levying for that today. You know, we're not enjoying, the public doesn't have that asset yet. And so, you know, you can kind of make a public finance argument that taxpayers today shouldn't be paying for an asset that's going to be used later. You know, I think financial planning wise, we're doing the right thing, but I think you can make that other argument. But understanding, and we really don't know how much everything is going to cost. We've got estimates based on the planning study. So the dropping the levy for road construction, I think if we knew what we were going to do with our local option sales tax, you might feel a little, there might be a comfort level in doing something like that. Because I think one of your options in the long term is to enact the full 0.5% and not spend property tax dollars on road construction anymore, because you would have ample dollars. In fact, you'd have more dollars even by doing that. So, but you know, you haven't made that decision yet, so I don't know that that's the best option to do that today. You might be able to do that next with the 2023 budget.
It's been my observation, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but that the highway department's budget out of the levy has been pretty much flat over the years.
It has.
So taking it out of there, in my mind, is not an option, because they've been probably the most frugal of all the departments as far as.
I think, as Mike was saying, the only reason you would do that is if you're thinking of using sales tax to fund more of the roads rather than the levy. That would kind of be a permanent change that you have to decide.
I know when we passed that sales tax, that was one of my concerns, is that eventually the highway department, that would be replacing what they were already given, and then that would be shuffled off to other departments. And so in my mind, that's not an option.
so I think there, the idea would be, and I don't even know where I would personally land with this, is that we would just be replace it with a different funding source, and it would not get moved to someplace else. That money would go away, that particular amount. So you're concerned if it would be just used to make other departments go up. I certainly would share in that. But my understanding is that what we'd be saying is we need this much money to do these many things. Is the funding source property taxes? Is it sales tax? Is it a mix? But it would not go to replace anything. That's partially how you would lower the levy.
Yeah,
Would make sure of that.
My suggestion there is, you know, if you've enacted the full 0.5%, you're going to have significant more dollars to use for road construction and road projects. And there's a lot of, I think, good reasons to use sales tax instead of property taxes to build roads and to maintain roads. It's just, you know, it's a less regressive tax, and those that are coming into the county would be helping pay for it. But that's not you know, we're working on presenting you with some options for extending the sales tax, and that discussion is going to happen, you know, in the future. So that's why I just want to bring that up. I wouldn't want to see the board cut the budget by cutting that part of the levy unless we knew where we were going with the sales tax.
Commissioner Notch?
Yeah, but thanks for the extra effort probably in doing this, you know, because there's all kinds of variables, even when you look at the bonding costs. I mean, we're probably using rates that are today's rates. We're 2 years from now, you know, if you factor in 2% more on there, I mean, that levy increase could be a lot more. And the other thing too, you know, just talking highway, you know, those costs for trucks and all this stuff doesn't go away either. And the sales tax funds the roads, but the highway still needs, you know, a budget of so much to replace equipment and do things that that sales tax doesn't do, so. But yeah, I really appreciate you took the time to dig a little deeper.
Commissioner Persky.
Yeah, Randy and Steve, Sherry, you probably already done this, but I'm asking for the public just to know, have we done everything we can with interest rates? As far as interest rates being so low that, have we squeezed every place we can as far as reducing them in areas, trading it out and looking again at the debt service?
Yeah, and Sarah can help me out here, but we've refunded all the bonds that we can. Those are all done. I think, the only thing like it's been said by Steve and others is we don't know where interest rates are in the future, and you're going to have a big project coming ahead that's going to take a lot of interest costs. So the timing on that and what happens with interest rate is a concern.
We are down to only 2 bonds in our debt service portfolio, and one of those does fall off this year, so we'll be down to a minimal amount.
Now, sometimes we just need to be able to go away and ponder. So if people have questions, if individual board members have questions or other ideas, please come up. Or if you're thinking things right now, Commissioner Knopf.
I was just wondering if we can get a copy of that presentation.
Yeah, I'll send this out to all of you after the meeting.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
it's really,
thanks.
it's helpful to be able to reflect on it. And I think everybody's brought up important issues with each of those. It's a challenging place to be. Thank you for not just going through a mental exercise, but helping us really understand what the potential is here.
Yeah, it was a good exercise for us to go through, and I think it helps the board
Great, thank you.
delve a little deeper in the budget too.
Great. Commissioner Mergen.
I realize this isn't, in the grand scheme of things, a great percentage, but every little bit helps. All those outside agencies that we're throwing $2,000, $3,000 at or whatever that I've mentioned before, those should not be on here when we're talking about reducing budgets over in the highway department and things. As long as those are on there, I don't see where we've got a big issue, big problem with money. If we can throw money like that out there.
I think a challenge there is I think there's only one entity left that really goes in that category, as opposed to the others that we have particular relationships, services, or work that we're doing together. There's one that's a grant, the others are not grants. So
I think I've listed 4 or 5 of them that are definitely.
And I can see where you may say that, why are we doing that? They're just,
Exactly.
in my mind, they're not the same. They're not the same as us giving a few $1,000s here or there to a group that we like. We're actually getting something in return.
I can think of a lot of groups I like that aren't on here.
Yeah, I'm saying we don't have those anymore, except for one. We are actually, these are things that we're doing. And we brought, I guess this would be Lee's, the horse is probably dead on this.
As
We'll
I'm
get a
looking at
chance to
this,
vote on
as
it.
I'm looking at this list right now, there's more than one that I would. Start with Greater St. Cloud Development, St. Cloud Downtown Council, Initiative Foundation,
Right.
where we've had problems with them before.
Right.
St. Cloud Area Convention.
Again, some of those end up
Tri-County
acting as
Humane.
our economic development. We don't have an internal economic development office. We work through partnership with others. So if we want to look at going internally, then we could ask for what a budget would be for that as well. But that is part of those. But we've talked about that before, and I think what you're hearing from Commissioner Mergen is, can you relook at that list again? I'm not sure I'm in the same place, obviously, with most of those, because I think that we would need to replace it with people inside. So.
And we at least since I've been here, a number of those have been reduced dramatically.
Yep. I
I
think
would
we're
like
getting
them
some good
reduced
value.
to 0.
I understand that, Commissioner Murray.
Right. I'm not sure we have 3 votes for that, though, so. So anything else on this for right now? Because we're going up to a 5-minute break, and then we still have a bunch of board meeting left. Commissioner Persky, did you have something?
I just want to echo your thoughts, because sometimes it's difficult to put a price tag on what those organizations do. Greater St. Cloud Development Corporation, if they're able to bring in a company that's going to employ a good number of people, I mean, the economic boost to the community is tremendous. And and those tax dollars then come back to us. So it's hard to say what the return is, but if you take them off and they don't exist anymore, then some other resources might disappear as well substantially.
I believe they would still exist, I believe.
So after our break, we will be hearing from Corey Vasky, who's here, is going to be patient, wait for us for a few more minutes, and get our Veteran Services update. Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
Yeah, just want to know what the timeline is for subsequent decisions on this. When do we have to? This was information, I appreciate that. When do we have to have a decision on this?
Dr. Williams, will you go through that timeline again, please?
Commissioner Lenzmeyer, you have 2 meetings in November,
Yeah,
and the truth and taxation would be after your last regular meeting in November 30th. And then on December, whatever it is, 14th or 15th, that's when you would adopt the final budget. On that
well,
first,
we got some
the
time.
first and probably only meeting in December. So you've got a few meetings
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah, we can examine the hash.
All right, everybody, we are in recess.
Good to see you. Good.
back from our recess. Mr. Vasky, want to come up? I know that everybody's looking forward to getting to hear your report.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners.
Morning. Morning.
I am Corey Vasky, Stearns County Veteran Service Officer for those watching. I'm here to present my annual report to the board and go over our 2020 numbers. First, looking at some key markers for last year, we conducted 1,884 scheduled appointments. The estimated veteran population in 2020 was 9,493 for Stearns County. We conducted 30,916 phone calls, voicemails, and faxes. $61,213,000 was paid to veterans in Stearns County for disability compensation. If you include education payments, something called DIC, which is a compensation paid to surviving spouses, as well as pension payments to surviving spouses, the total dollars paid to residents in Stearns County was $65,997,000 from the VA. Approximately 6,034 veterans are actively enrolled or were actively enrolled in the VA Medical Center in 2020, which is about 63% of the estimated veteran population. Naturally, our office, like the rest of the world, was greatly impacted by the pandemic in 2020. As in-person appointments were suspended, we shifted to remote appointments. All but one person in our department was working from home. Essentially, all of our county veteran service officers were conducting remote appointments, doing those appointments, identifying the actions, and developing the forms, sending them out for signature. Our process specialists would then print them off in the office, mail them out for signature, along with instructions to the clients, and then we would receive those back, scan them in, process them, and send them off to the VA. To make this work, we did have to implement several additional steps for document handling and review. Eventually, we were able to also offer electronic signatures, and thanks to the Stearns County IS team for making that happen. Although our new processes were less efficient, we were able to offer the full scope of services throughout the pandemic and when we resumed in-person appointments here recently. We did overall have fewer recorded or captured appointments in 2020, 1,884 compared to 3,370 the previous year. Though I would say we were nonetheless busy. Part of that, I think, is a result of how we capture appointments. Previously, we were capturing most of those appointments as walk-ins or appointments when a person came into the office. Now, a lot of business was conducted through email that I think wasn't captured. And we're still kind of going through trying to figure out how to capture that information. So that number of interactions was definitely higher than that 1884 reflects, but probably nowhere close to that 3370 that we had the year before. So I think a better reflection, which I put in, I believe it is item B in my report, if you look, is the number of total claims actions. And that's not the total number of claims or actions that we did in our office, but I would say they make up the bulk of what we do in engaging with the VA. So it includes things like compensation claims, supplemental claims, appeals, grant applications for grants, and so forth. So if we look at what we did in 2019, which is one of our busier years, or probably the busiest year that I had recorded since I've been here, there was 1,070 claims actions compared to 1,041 that we did last year. So a little bit less, but not substantially less, I would say. And in addition, that was with a number of additional steps and processes added to the burden of assisting our clients. Some other notable bits of information from last year. We did implement a new client management program. It's called VetPro, which is a cloud-based program that allows us to direct submit. Essentially, the problem we had was the program we had was DOS-based and was not, with the CVSOs working from home, it was not functional, essentially, when the internet was slow. So we did need a different solution, and relatively, I would say, cheap as things go. So we spent about $2,250 out of our state grant to make that happen. The new program additionally also, as I mentioned, allows for direct submittal for claims, so that gives us a lot more flexibility as well as electronic signature capture. So even if we use Adobe Sign or this program, then we can submit those. So as our veterans become more comfortable with that, we anticipate that feature will be used more frequently. In August of 2020, one of our CVSOs of 13 years, Irv Karsh, retired out of Melrose. Irv was an excellent CVSO, was well liked by his veteran clientele, but it left a big gap for us, and luckily we were able to recruit for and fill that position. Unfortunately, the person we recruited for that position also left in May, so we were right back to training a new CVSO. CVSOs do function as advocates when it comes to claims development and submittal. It takes a long time. There's no formal training for CVSOs, and it's kind of on the ground as you get hired, training through the state, through the national organizations and so forth. So it does take some time before a person gets up to speed. Currently, the CVSO we hired for the Melrose office is getting to the point where he is starting to conduct his own interviews, and we anticipate we'll be doing more and more here in the near future. So we're hopeful that as he's able to function independently, we will be able to resume our regular outreach activities in the western part of Stearns County, as well as, depending on how things play out with Melrose, maybe get him set up out there. In response to the pandemic, the state of Minnesota designated $6.2 million in relief for veterans and their families through a handful of different grants. From April through December of last year, we submitted 235 applications, resulting in $168,304 coming back into Stearns County to assist those families. I would just say, and then to conclude, the work and efficacy of our office is hard to measure by the numbers, such as total dollars coming in or the number of claims submitted. Due to our office serving all who come in the door, we can at times spend a significant amount of time on a nuanced argument and ultimately be unsuccessful. We must approach each of these claims as unique claims with a unique set of facts. This approach is fundamental to good advocacy. However, it often takes time to identify those facts, identify the necessary evidence, and compile claims packets for submittal. When we are successful, it can also be hard to express the impact of those efforts. To one veteran, it could be the difference in the cost of a good pair of hearing aids due to a hearing injury sustained in the line of duty, or to another, it could be establishing access to care for long-standing substance use problems. On paper, that might just look like two different veterans receiving a 10% rating, from the VA for a disability, and $144 a month. But you don't see that sometimes the ancillary efforts. For us, one of those veterans, we may have only spent an hour and a half assisting in the development of that claim. The other veteran, we could have spent 10 hours, in reviewing and developing arguments for that claim. So it's hard sometimes when we're just looking at the data, the numbers, to really understand what the impact is, as well as the amount of work that goes into some of those claims. With that being said, thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. That was great. Comments, questions? Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
Is it possible to develop a training module for new employees, or is each case so unique, one size fits all may not be particularly appropriate?
You're touching on an area that's really something I've thought a lot about, and I've kind of trying to work back to the first principle issues, and where we're at. And I think ultimately part of the problem is nationally, even statewide, there aren't clear boundaries established for what the expectations are for CVSOs, and therefore sometimes it's hard to identify how do you train somebody in, what area do we focus on. I know what's important to me and so I can design a model, but there isn't a lot of support necessarily to focus on training in all of those areas. At one point, I was in conversation with St. Cloud State, and we were talking about kind of setting up like a program for like skills-based training. I know a lot of the state tends to focus on knowledge-based training and information, but looking at how do we develop, being able to write persuasively, being able to identify medical terminology. Right now, I don't know if it's possible for me, to design a program that would train everybody in on all of those areas. So we try to select for that when we're recruiting somebody, but also their capability, to be able to learn a lot of those different things in areas where they may not have the prior knowledge.
Dr. Williams.
Thanks, Corey. You do some training of your new folks, of course.
Oh, yes.
I actually sat in on some.
Sorry. I didn't mean to imply there was nothing, right?
Well, it does sound, one of those things that I'm hearing you say, and I've certainly seen before, is it's not like the state or the feds have really stepped up to the plate about any kinds of trainings that would be useful. And then, as you're saying, each entity ends up having its own needs. So it makes it more challenging, especially when you have a long time, very capable staff person leave, and now you're trying to do this twice with a smaller staff. So it'd be great, whether it's St. Cloud State or someplace else would even help with a certificate or something else.
Absolutely. And I think
more broadly.
I would say for us as CVSOs, at least as a state association, our focus needs to be on establishing kind of those standards of service and best practices. And then once we do that, then we can design training programs that the state then can augment. I think the state's looking to CVSOs collectively to provide some guidance. And so that's kind of where we're at. So I have been working sort of behind the scenes with other CVSOs and talking to the state and having that conversation for several years now. So I think there's some momentum gaining on that.
Dr. Williams.
Yeah, just Corey, of course, didn't emphasize that as much as I know that he's truly been a leader in his association in trying to develop some, whatever you call it, trainings, guidelines, standards for not only for the employees, but also for CVSOs.
Which is great. Yeah, thank you for your work on that, and then feedback on some of the issues that may come up that we all might hear about from a federal standpoint too. Commissioner Lensmeyer.
Sometimes comparing what we perceive to be like-sized entities, other counties by population don't reflect the true picture of the load imposed on certain offices within those counties. For example, the populations of Stearns, Sherburne, and Wright are somewhat comparable, but because the impact on your office, because of the location of the VA hospital, is a magnitude larger than your office's function in those other two counties. I don't know that's necessarily widely appreciated. I don't know if you have any additional comments or more insightful comments on that phenomenon.
Mr. Maskey.
Thank you, Commissioner Lensmeyer. I would just say that it's not a revelation that St. Cloud's is a crossroads, so there's that element. And additionally, with the St. Cloud VA being in our area of operation, it is attractive to veterans with high medical needs. And I do see, and this is just anecdote, I don't have any data to support it, but people move to this area to be closer to the VA so that they can get their services met, and it's a little more convenient for them. So I do think every 2 years, it takes the VA a year to release it, but they put out a population study. And every year, every time a new population study comes out, the amount they predicted we would be reduced in veteran population is never nearly as close as they had originally estimated. And I anticipate that's largely because veterans tend to gravitate towards the St. Cloud area because the VA is here.
The veterans waves, veteran services and the veterans come in waves. We've certainly now, through, due to age, and we're certainly through the World War II folks, and we're well into the Korean War folks. The Vietnam folks are still numerous. Back in the day, the Vietnam era folks were reluctant to access services because of their harsh treatment when they came back from service. The general public inappropriately accused them of causing all the problems in their area of service. Has that reluctance for from the veterans, is that worn down a little bit as age changed their perspective at all?
Mr. Vasky.
I don't have any data, really to suggest. I would say,
when you talk to these folks,
based on my impression, I would say that has softened over the years, definitely. But I think I still come across a veteran every now and then who says, absolutely not. I don't care what you have to say. I'm not interested. I've also worked with some of those veterans who, particularly Vietnam veterans, who were like that for many decades and then did re-engage our office. Or we had a casual conversation at an outreach event and they said, sure, let's have a conversation. Come in and we'll see what's available. A lot of times I think the precipitating event that causes them to engage us is they've gotten older and they have medical needs and they want to see what's available. It's been a number of years and they want to see if there's something that's available for treatment, either to reduce their expenses or offer a treatment they're not otherwise eligible for outside of the VA. So occasionally we do get a vet. I had one maybe 2 weeks ago. I think I had a Vietnam vet never engaged our office, never filed a claim and came in. So it still happens from time to time.
Commissioner Persky and then Commissioner Mergen.
Okay. Lee, I can relate to those Vietnam veterans. I got a good number of family and friends that fit in that category. And I must say, with the reports I get from the VA and then also from our county services are quite good. So I want to say I very much appreciate the effort here in town and the effort of our office. But on the negative or shortcoming side or frustrating side, what is an area that you see that, is it wait time or is it lack of attention or quality care? Is there a complaint or a frustration that some of the veterans you think are experiencing?
Could you be a little more specific on?
I'm just wondering if you're getting, I'm just wondering if there's something
our
we
office
can,
function?
what you're hearing as far as quality of care or wait time or things that we could be doing to better shortcomings that we might have or where we could improve. Do you see anything there?
I would say with claims, there's a lot of confusion with disability claims. With Veterans Benefits Administration, we see a lot of inconsistencies in the development and the decisions that are made. We'll get a veteran that says, I have this condition, my buddy had the same condition. We both filed claims, very similar circumstances. One gets good development, the other doesn't. One gets granted, one gets denied. So they get frustrated, with the claims. The claims do take a while, but overall, the initial claims decisions are better than they were in previous years. I would say the appeals, there's an appeals backlog. We're right back to where we were 2 to 3 years ago, and it's a problem. It's on the VA's radar. When it comes to veterans health, overall, generally pretty good feedback on the St. Cloud VA Medical Center. One of the continuous issues that comes up is that, the providers frequently change and there's not always continuity in their providers, but I don't know that that's even within the VA's control.
Okay. Well,
Thank you. That's helpful. Commissioner Mergen.
I do all of my medical at the VA, and just my observation as to why the numbers are, one of the reasons that the numbers are up there is that this is one of the better VAs around as far as the quality of service. And I hear that quite regularly from other veterans.
I agree. I'm not here to advocate on behalf of the VA, but I agree. Most of the feedback I get is very good.
Great.
Yeah, it's got to be an adventure because you have veteran services delivered at 3 different levels of government. And sometimes it's an adventure to coordinate those efforts. So I'm glad we got a resource that at least understands it if they can't actually fix it.
Thank you.
Appreciate that advocacy piece. We know it makes a real difference too. So thank you. Please thank your other county veteran service officers. And sometimes I sit there and think about, it's another example where, since by statute we have them in many counties, it would be great if I know that there's a lot of cross fertilization, as it were, but sometimes that makes it challenging too for the veteran involved, it not being necessarily regional per se. So thank you for working on that piece as well.
Thank you.
Great. Ms. Teich, Public Works.
Good morning, everyone. For my first item today, I'm going to ask the board to update the bid opening date for SAP 073-613-025. That's replacement of Bridge 7163 along County Road 13 right in Melrose. At your October 5th meeting, you approved a bid opening date of November 12th, 2021. I'm asking the board to approve a revised bid opening date of Tuesday, November 23rd at 11 a.m. I just obviously need the board to approve the bid opening date, but as a side note, some of our approvals and our funding approvals from MnDOT have been delayed slightly. So I'm just asking the board to approve that updated bid opening.
Commissioner Morgan?
I'll move to approve the updated bid opening.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Notch. Seeing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails.
All right, and related to the same project, my next item is I'm asking the board to approve a construction inspection services contract with WSB and Associates for that contract. This would be a joint contract between the City of Melrose and Stearns County, with Stearns County being the lead agency on it. Keep in mind, this is an estimated amount. It equates to about 8% of the overall contract amount. There's a significant amount of work. The city also on the same contract will have some dam repair work. They're realigning the river channel. We're of course replacing the bridge. We have street work, and the city has some additional street work. So at this point, the estimated cost is broke down about 64% county, 36% city. So our portion would be just under $279,000. This is based on a prorated costs between each entity. So as we get bid prices and final quantities, those percentages may vary slightly, but this is a rough idea. Please keep in mind that we got one quote or one proposal for this work because WSB did the full design. The city wanted to go with WSB as they are the city engineer. So that is our reason to try and coordinate. 2 consultants would likely raise those costs for us. So that's the reason we bypassed getting multiple proposals for this work, because the city had made up their mind. So I'm asking the board to approve this contract and authorize staff to sign.
I'll move approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Nudge.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Mergen. See no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Sorry, Commissioner Lensmeyer, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, the next year with the city and county boosting transportation expenditures, I haven't tracked the actions of adjacent counties, but with the spike in the demand for contractor services, what's the depth of the providers around here that would potentially be bidders? Is the significant increase in transportation spending put us at a disadvantage in terms of bidding? we're able to get competitive
Tyke.
prices out of that.
I don't think we're at the point that we have so fully saturated the market that we will see a huge impact for that. One of the reasons our costs are higher is the types of projects we're doing. And granted, I know the city's take may be different. They may just be doing more work. But for instance, our County Road 72 project is a concrete surfacing with a bridge replacement. So the concrete surfacing is more expensive. That's why we only choose to do that in areas where the subsoil's dictated, or in this case, it's got an old concrete trunk highway underneath it. And this is probably the less expensive option for us short of full reconstruction. And then we have a significant amount of resurfacing, which is generally one contractor, and it takes the full summer for that contractor to do that. If there is a much larger infusion through perhaps a federal bill, we might be looking at things a little bit differently, but at the same time, we're hoping that contractors will have time to gear up, and hopefully we will have that workforce there. I could go on and on about some of, between the County Engineers Association and the Transportation Alliance, how we are hoping to get the word out to expand that workforce with civil technicians, civil engineers, contractor workforce, et cetera. And we're working with the trades on some of that to try and expand that workforce and hit those kids younger. I know that's longer term solution, but we're hoping, like I said, if we have a large infusion of outside funding, that those contractors would have time to gear up for that.
Thank you. That was actually really helpful. Do you have any miscellaneous items?
I do have 2 miscellaneous items, information only. So just a reminder that tomorrow night, from 5:30 to 7:30, we are having a public information meeting. As you're aware, the state is turning back Trunk Highway 237 from New Munich all the way up to Interstate 94. So we will be doing a reconstruction project in 2023. We're going to have that public information meeting at New Munich City Hall. So that's just a reminder, if anybody's interested in that, or if you have questions, you can certainly get a hold of us. And then I know there was some discussion on those road program options. I'm hoping to have those back to you. I do need to coordinate with Dr. Williams, and we're going to be going through those shortly. And then I would get those out to the board members in advance of the next board meeting. And at that board meeting, I will give you an update on the planned public input process for the in-person, and then describe what we're going to be trying to do online as well.
That road that's being turned back, does the state have to redo that up to the county standards first?
Tyke.
The state is paying us to bring it up to county standards. As a side note, generally it's a lump sum payment. We were able to fortunately put a few more demands on this particular one. So they do have money set aside to reimburse us for engineering costs, right-of-way costs, and then obviously the full reconstruction of that road to bring it up to our standards. We did also ask that they purchase the right-of-way necessary from a state agency that owns property along there, so we would not have to go through that process. So that was certainly helpful for us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Persky.
Quick question. Weather's changing. How we set on salt and sand supply? Are we okay? Are prices okay?
We are sitting very well on our salt supply in all of our shops. And so I'm not saying we're anxiously awaiting winter, but we're ready for it when it comes. We would like to finish a little bit of our construction. We have a small amount remaining. There is a culvert replacement taking place southeast in New Munich, or not New Munich, excuse me, St. Martin this week. It'll go into about mid-November. That will get back paved before winter operations start. And then we are also paving County Road 71 south of Richmond and finishing up some of that work, guardrail striping, signing, et cetera, to prepare it for the winter so we can finish the final lift next year. So we're not waiting for winter just yet.
No, I just wondering on the supply side, just so that there are shortages in some commodities. So
we're in a good place right now.
Good.
Well, may we get through the rest of construction first, and it's good to know that. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, environmental services. Spencer, it looks like you got a couple things for us.
I do. Good morning. We're still in morning here at this time. So Shelley Benson, Environmental Services Director. 2 items, both solid waste related. The first is adoption of the solid waste management plan resolution so that we can send the plan to the state. The process is we develop the plan with the consultant. I believe you saw a past draft of it in May. We had some conversation. We go back and forth with the state. So they've actually previewed this prior to it coming here. We send this resolution in, and then they go through their formal review process and put it out for publication for public comment. Once we get the public comment back, if there are any changes, we amend those, make those amendments, and then it comes back to you for final approval. So a little bit of back and forth with the state, but we should be in good shape. So the first agenda item, it would be approval of the resolution, which is on packet page 252. Unless you have questions for me about the solid waste management plan. There was a good summary, I think.
It was a
that
good
there.
summary. That was very helpful. Very helpful. Does anyone have any questions, or is there a motion for submitting this for review and approval to the MPCA?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Notch. Seeing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails.
Excellent. And then the next agenda item is approval of our solid waste hauler contracts. So every 3 years, we go through and redo our contracts with our haulers, and you'll see our list of haulers here, and it'll be a 3-year contract. Minor modifications went through the attorney's office, all of those things. So we are just looking for approval of those contracts.
I'll move to approve with a question.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Your question?
Yeah, so do they kind of trickle in as time goes on? Because I know other years you always see some show up and another
Yes.
meeting.
We are.
Is there a deadline? Maybe that's.
Yeah, there's a deadline, but haulers don't like to follow deadlines.
okay.
So we think we have everybody. There might be, I think we might have one outstanding contract or hauler left, but we tried to get everybody all at one time. So, yeah, we can
This
put a
list looks
deadline.
pretty short compared
I know,
to
I was
what's
thinking
out
the
there,
same
but-
thing. I was wondering the same question. Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
I would guesstimate that a lot of the folks that we rely on with contracts and other ways to get services done are also impacted by the current labor situation. So I can see where maybe a particular operator had some retirements or maybe, well, you know, had some of their people change employers. So there's all kinds of things at work that would make a hauler get involved with us or not.
So I guess a follow-up on that is, do you anticipate we may still see any? And since it's past the deadline, what does that mean, if anything?
Well, we would still enter into a contract
That's
with
what I
them.
thought.
We do
Okay.
have one that I believe is outstanding. There have been some consolidations, though. People have bought out other companies, et cetera. So, yeah, the list might be a little shorter than previously.
We'll see no further discussion. There's been a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails.
And that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me. We're keeping it short and sweet.
Thank you. But we are going to, do not see anything right now. Thank you very much. We are going to recess this meeting to come back together as the Human Services Board. Ms. Huberty?
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Melissa Huberty, I'm the Human Services Administrator. There are 3 items on the Human Services consent agenda and 1 on the regular agenda today. The consent agenda items are on J1 through J3 on pages 467 through 470. The first is just our agreement for child support enforcement activities. The second is our contract with the Central Minnesota Mental Health Center for detoxification services. And the third is claims paid on behalf of Human Services clients. And I am available for questions.
Any questions on these 3 items?
I'll move to recommend an action on the consent
Thank you.
agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Knott. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. See no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. Any
All right.
miscellaneous things?
Thank you. I do have one regular item on the Human Services Board agenda
There it
today.
is.
It's item K1 on page 472, and I'm really excited to have our Public Health Director, our Human Services Director, Janet Golagowski, give you a COVID-19 update.
Good morning, Ms. Golagowski.
Let's move that. There we go. There you go. Perfect. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Again, I'm Janet Golagowski. I am the Public Health Director, and I am here to provide some information to you this morning on COVID. So a little thing called a pandemic has been happening for a little bit now. Wanted to let you know what do the new cases look like in Stearns County. So just really quickly, for the week of October 14 to 20, we are starting to see cases plateau. We're at a 94-day average for the last 7 days. The previous 7 days to that, we were right around 120 new cases. So we are seeing a little drop and we're starting to see a plateau. To give you a little bit of reference, when this began in April of 2020, we saw an increase when we became aware of COVID, and then a lull, and then we saw a huge increase right prior to vaccinations, another lull, and at the very end, you can see how fast the Delta variant grew and how it peaked. So what do our vaccinations look like in Stearns County right now? People with at least 1 vaccine dose, it's about 73,000, and folks who have completed the vaccine series is about 70,000. As you know, or you may have heard, a series will now include a 3rd shot, somewhat colloquially known as a booster. Those are widely available. You can sign up anywhere. There are categories, but you self-select in those categories. So if you choose, please do so. And then this is the breakdown by age. So you can see the 65 plus group, 82% vaccinated. Our 16 plus group, about 56% vaccinated. Overall, the CDC is indicating in light blue that there's about a 77% vaccination rate. Also, just so you know, as an additional, the 5 to 11-year-old vaccination for Pfizer is under review currently, and Moderna shortly after that. So we are expecting approval of that soon. How do we collaborate and support? In terms of our,
I'm sorry, can I ask you a quick question? The CDC, the 18 plus, is that statewide?
The CDC 18 plus is statewide.
Okay. The other 2 are Stearns.
Correct. The other 2 are
That's what I
Stearns.
thought, but I wanted to make sure.
Thank you. So most of the priority work that we have been doing is to support our hotline phone calls as well as those essential services. MDH receives the essential services, and we're able to make those connections for people: food, mask supplies, cleaning supplies, disinfecting, those kinds of things. And then we work very, very closely with the schools, both a weekly support call with the superintendents with all the districts are invited to. And in addition to that, we help provide some connections with MDH regarding testing facilities, testing supplies, trying to get those kinds of activities up and running. By far, our biggest focus is working with those community groups that have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So one of those groups that we're currently offering boosters to is any of our homebound folks. In our collaboration with Centricare, we do most of our homebound work. And then in addition, we work very closely with many community groups to do vaccination teams. We work closely with Centricare as well as our surrounding counties to assure that we're all able to put our time, our effort, our vaccines, and ordering those into play and getting that done. And then the other piece that we do too is our vaccination team. So we've created pods of teams, nurses, educators, and connectors to assure that when people have questions, we're able to answer those. We currently have a dental services pod occurring at the COP house. And so we're able to provide dental services to children who have that need. And then in addition, do some outreach and education for those. One of your questions might be regarding hospitals. We're disinclined to really comment or speak to what the hospitals are experiencing, but we stay in close collaboration with them. They're clearly, obviously full and struggling with some staffing and putting some of their own strategies into play to mitigate that. And then if you have any questions.
Commissioner Mergen.
Can you have several? Can you tell me what we hear about all the cases. Can you tell me what the death rates were?
Yes, I can tell you that we have 231 folks that have passed away from COVID in the last, looks like the last week. And then I can get you more information on that as well.
Do you know what the rate is?
I don't know what the rate is.
Okay. Can you tell me what the average yearly death rate has been over the last 5 years for the flu?
I cannot tell you that either.
Okay. Another thing, I've seen several articles about doctors that are concerned about the long-term effects that this might have on children.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, 30 years down the road. Do you have any, I don't know how possibly it can be measured, but any comments on that?
I do not. We're watching all of that information as well. We have lots of conversations about that. It would be very hard to predict what's going to happen down the road. I'm not sure if you're referring to vaccines or COVID itself, but there's lots of studies being done nationwide and worldwide, frankly, about the long-term effects of COVID-19.
And I know doctors, I've seen some articles too, that are afraid to speak up, that disagree with some of the things that are going on because fearful of their job. And there was just one that was fired up in Fergus Falls because he spoke up just with the mask mandates. Mm-hmm. So I know there's a lot of fear in doctors out there.
Agent Orange effect.
Yep, that's one of the things that
certainly
the government said was safe to the troops, but.
And one of the questions, I didn't hear this one specifically, is the impact on kids having been out of school or having their school changed so much, what that's going to impact. And we were talking about mental health earlier and just the impact on parents as well as others. And I know that we were getting some questions. I don't know if people got to see it. Dr. George Morris had a letter out in the last week that Centricare's physicians actually are almost 100%, have been 100% vaccinated. A challenge really is for a lot of other people who may be in the health profession about what they're deciding to do or not do. Commissioner Nutch.
Yeah, Janet, can you just clarify? Commissioner Mergen asked about how many deaths there. Did you say 231?
231.
Not in the last week, though.
You know, let me confirm that. I don't want to misspeak on our dashboard here.
Or would that be the state? That wouldn't be Stern.
This is, yes.
That might be if it's our dashboard, it might be our total deaths related to COVID. Right,
since the beginning. Yeah.
Correct. We actually, we have
231.
So the SHAC meeting, which at some point your life will let you be able to come back to. There's a bunch of questions to a couple of staff on these items, including we were talking about mental health, among other things. And we're asking for information that relates to like since the beginning of the year or like in the last month, because everything just seems so cumulative. And so that's one of the things they said they would try to get back to us, and hopefully we can. And we did say by area, it would really be helpful to be able to see that. I know it's hard because I ask for maps every now and then, and they only really get to zip codes, and that can make it be a little bit more challenging. But we know our school districts have been trying to deal with that information too. But I think that's a cumulative to date for our county.
Yes, 231 is cumulative to date for our county.
Okay, thanks.
Well, anybody else? We'll certainly appreciate it as we keep going through this. It's one of the, we were talking a little bit for those of us who were at our strategic planning last week, is just the pathway forward. It's so important, and all of us want to make sure we can get back to as doing as many of the things as we want to, and we still have this going on. And so we know it's tricky for your staff, so thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate that. So if I recall correctly, we now, and so we're going to reconvene our regular meeting, and we will be taking a brief break and moving into closed session after that break. But before we do that, if you want to do issues by commissioner now, we certainly can. Joe, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I don't have much. Just on this, we got a couple of events happening before our next meeting. The trick-or-treaters will be out. Just a public service announcement to be safe, be careful. Likewise, deer hunting is another time. There's a lot of excitement around that, and be safe out there in the woods, but also be courteous with other hunters. Sometimes minds switch and people get a little bit excited too much about the animals and don't consider the other hunters. So have a good time and enjoy the deer hunt.
Thanks. Commissioner Lensmeyer?
Nothing.
Commissioner Mergen?
I have nothing.
Besides, I do want to go back to hopefully you're going to be successful in bringing that baseball tournament to central Minnesota. That'd be great. Commissioner Notch.
I don't have anything either.
Okay. I don't either. I mean, I think we're trying to make sure, as you said, with the fall as we're transitioning, that with the days growing shorter, that people are able to get out and enjoy it as much as they can. Yeah. And with that, Dr. Williams, do you have one?
Please, Madam Chair. I think our goal-setting retreat went well. Unfortunately, we were missing two commissioners. Part of what we did, well, there's things you can't help. Part of that was, if you remember, we did the insights, and I do have your report, Commissioner Notch and Commissioner Persky. You can still go and complete that profile, and then you'll have that report.
All right.
And of course, we'll be pulling things together and following up with the board and that. And sometime I don't have the time frame yet because I haven't reviewed the reports yet. But as you know, you'll see that all again in one way, shape, or form. And I'd appreciate it in the future, Commissioner Persky, if you didn't bring up snow plowing until after deer hunting. Because I like to hunt in my shirt sleeves. So
I have one other public service announcement. That is November 1st. In many of our municipalities have an overnight parking. So, and I've had people, Persky, can you do anything about this ticket? Well, I can't. But so yeah, many of the cities do not allow you to overnight park after November 1st. So.
And hopefully their cities will be getting that information out.
Yeah, hopefully.
So we don't have to.
Yeah.
All right. All right. With that, we are going to technically, we're just moving to closed session right now.
unless you need a break.
Yes, after the break.
It takes a couple minutes for them to shut everything down.